Hey, Chad Peterman here, your host of the Can't Stop the Growth podcast, a show that advances the home services industry and beyond. For today's episode, I'm about to pass the mic to our partners at smartac.com for their special monthly series on all things innovation and business. Together, we bring content that empowers you to build a positive, healthy workplace for you, your people, and your bottom line. So let me officially pass the mic to smartac.com for today's episode, chock full of insights that you can take and apply to your growth. Now listen and grow.
Hello, and welcome to Experience Matters, the monthly series created by and for entrepreneurs and leaders, specifically in the home services industry. Whether you're navigating the integration of cutting-edge technology, expanding your team, or aiming to elevate your brand experience, we've got you covered. Each month, we'll bring practical solutions, innovative concepts, and insider knowledge to fuel the growth of your business. Along the way, we'll feature several industry leaders to share their knowledge and insights. We appreciate you being here. Let's get started. Hey guys, we are back with part 2 of our special 2-part series about the entrepreneurial roller coaster with Landon Brewer. If you missed part 1, be sure to check it out for some great insights. All right, let's get back to it. Okay, so moving on a little bit down the chain where, like you're, let's call it into the thriving phase, right? That's the part where you want to be. Not as many people actually get there. Sometimes you feel like you're always adapting, but there's a term out there called Imposter Syndrome, where sometimes you move into the phase where things are actually working, and then you look around and you say, like, what happened? Am I the guy that should be leading this? How did I get here? What happened, right? I want to hear from either of you guys if that's ever been a thing. Because I have to tell you, for me, definitely, right? Definitely when people have asked me to step on stage and talk about something, or they want to interview me for something, I'm like, I'm not anybody special. Why, right? So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
Going back to what Landon said a minute ago, I think as far as like traits that people have to keep growing and being delusional and things like that, I do think vision is a big part of that. I've always had the belief that we were going to figure it out. Landon talked about how, today we have so many things at our disposal to go learn from. And, to the extent that you ever get to a spot where you're not able to know what the next step is, if any business out there can have success, I'm going to have success, right? Is I think the belief that you have to have. I think the biggest thing I've seen in growing a business is that at some point it becomes kind of like you have to scale, right? So the first thing is to figure out what the hell you're doing. The second thing is to find product market fit. And then the third thing is to kind of like reproduce that over and over and over again, right? And so like in a contracted business, that might be marketing, and it might be your production staff, and it might be your sales staff, and you have to continually be scaling that. I don't think realistically, most people should get to that point unless the business just changes to a completely different organism where, you're now going from 0 to 50 million is one thing, but then to go to 50 million to 300 is a totally different skill set. And I do think at some point, a business that rarely would you have an operator that would be the optimal one to take it from 0 to 100, that would be the, right person to take it from 100 to 300 million. I have never reached that state yet. Maybe, hopefully one day we do, and I'm outmatched for running a $2 billion company. But I think in general, there's something that comes along with just understanding every step of what it took to get there, and making sure that you don't lose any of that focus on, what got you there. It's not necessarily going to do the same thing to get to the next level, but certainly there's some core competencies in the culture that took you to that point.
Yeah, I was having a conversation one time with the founder of Green Sky, the financing company. And we were driving back to his hotel, and he I think it was Ken actually that asked him that question. He said, so, you're at $3 billion, what's the journey from, he went from 0 to $1 billion, then 1 to 2, then 2 to 3. And he said, well, then exactly what you said. He said, the guy that, the folks that got just from, 0 to 500 million are not going to be the people that get you to $1 billion and $2 billion and $3 billion. and you just got to take incremental leaps along the way. But it doesn't mean that those people aren't still the right people at a different phase of that business or a different, section of that business. And figuring out how to navigate that can be a tricky task because people feel ownership, right? It's like they feel like a co-founder, and so I think you have to also exemplify that yourself, right? So I've always had the perspective that day one, I'm looking for somebody better than me at everything, right? I need a dynamic salesperson, it's way better than me at sales. I need a CFO and a controller that's way better accounting than me. I need an operations manager that is absolutely just organized with great managerial talents and skill sets. And I think you have to do that. And I think as you're scaling a business and going into that thriving stage, people always say, well, what do you do first? Like, do you have to get new calls first? Is it marketing? Do you have to get, should you elevate your recruiting and get more people? And should you the answer is all of the things. Like, the answer is yes. You got to do marketing. You got to do manpower. You got to put the budgets together. You got to get the accounting in line. You can't not do any of those things. You have to elevate your sales process simultaneously. You have to, and it's a lot to manage, but at that level, when you're thriving, you should have key people that are leaders in your organization that are leading those changes and working together to do that. And it seems crazy, but that you have to do it all at the same time.
Well, I think at the end of the day, as a founder, the two most important things for you to do is set the vision for where you're going as a business. Once the vision is beyond what you can see, that's the right time for somebody else to step in and run that business, because they can see in their mind's eye what the next 3 years is. And then the second thing is you have to know yourself well enough to know what you're strong at, what you're not strong at. It's very common to see founders take a different role in an organization. Once you need a CEO that's taken a business from $1 billion to $5 billion, that's fine. But then let that founder, get involved in the thing that they really, makes them excited to get out of bed every single morning. Well, just like you're trying to find people better than you at every other part of the business, there will come a day in really any organization, if they keep growing, there will come a day to where someone is better than you at that specific thing that you're doing. And so I think the understanding of putting the organism first and if that means that you take a different responsibility in the organization, then sometimes that's right for the business to keep growing if you haven't exited or if that's still the mission of the company.
Yeah, when we were, I've had different phases where we sold businesses before. And so, when you sell private equity, typically you say, hey, like, here's the opportunity. We need to add different layers of executive support over here. And so you can either take the approach of like, I was a minority partner in the business. And I'm like, well, I'm not working for somebody else and I'm not going to do this. And this is mine. And I don't agree with this person. And so sometimes you have to just silo yourself and say, you know what? It's better for the organization to, let this person come in and learn and develop and grow and take it to different places that you could take it. And sometimes you have to, if you're in the minority in a decision in the business, you're like, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think it's the right call. I think we should do this. But you get voted out. You got to put all that crap aside and say, I'm gung-ho. We're doing it this way. And you got to go sell it. And most people, that's a very difficult pill to swallow.
So let's jump to like more modern day, Landon, what you're doing now. You obviously were a huge part of Gettle's success. And then when you guys sold the private equity fairly recently, you had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different things. And so I want to hear a little bit more about the origin story of what you're doing now, how you started it, and then where are you guys in your stage, right, of how you view your business, surviving, adapting, thriving, all that.
Well, after Gettle, I retired temporarily. He retired because I don't know what else to say other than exited. I then joined a whole bunch of boards and did some industry stuff and started doing some, it was whatever I could do to fill my time. And I joined the board of an organization called Legacy Service Partners. And that scaled rapidly. And there's a couple of guys that are founders of that had a vision that it was kind of like you guys, like, we don't understand the industry, we don't know the people, and tell us how do we think and how should we put the infrastructure together. And so I did that for a while, and the market shifted and they took an early exit. And so we sold, and then I stopped doing that. About a year and a half later, then I just started, I built a little kind of software infrastructure. I saw kind of the weakness in the space being the data that we were talking about, meaning what I think sets both of those other organizations apart and gave them such high valuations and multiples, were the fact that there was this like a centralized hub. And I've always, in all of the businesses, first it was spreadsheets, then it was like an access database that we could all access and data input in. And then finally, we're taking information out of like ServiceTitan, and then finally we're able to get an API with ServiceTitan and build all of our kind of KPI hub. But it was kind of the central thing that united all of the businesses. From, I would joke and say, well, I could run all these businesses from my underwear in bed, because I could just pull up a computer and see all the KPIs and see the performance of every individual and say, hey, this is wrong, this is right, this is what we need to do here. And if a KPI is off, do this or do that. And you can figure out how to unite the businesses that way under a common infrastructure, common operating system, common business. And I think like Gettle, for example, they took it to a super extreme where you had to be the same brand and you had to become a Gettle, and everything you had to do the exact same way and look and feel it. And it got a certain value add for that. I don't know that that's the right strategy overall in the space for acquiring kind of like large scale successful businesses. It's great for getting underperforming businesses and turning them, but if you get a 40-year-old business that's very successful and rebranding, it doesn't make any sense. So, we applied the same thing there. And what I noticed is like, that's really the big thing that all the private equity, all the investors are looking for. That's that piece of certainty that it gives them. It's like, okay, somebody that really understands the business is operating these things. They aren't just a collection of stuff, which I think is the big problem with consolidation. It's just a collection of companies. They don't operate the same way. They don't have the same sales cycle. They have the same service protocol. They don't sell the same things. They have a different way of pricing. They don't have the same business units, departments. It's just a collection of stuff, right? And so I know that if we can build the infrastructure and do it correctly and demonstrate control, we can build something of value. And that's what all of these other businesses that were kind of underperforming and weren't part of that, group of companies really needed. So I built that and started selling it as like, here, plug into our data center and I can jump on a call with you and tell you what's wrong with your business and what to do about it. And here's how and so we started doing that. And in a number of those companies, there were a whole bunch of Nexstar companies that got together, like, we want to sell our business and we want to kind of put it together, but we aren't at the spot where we can sell it yet. It's kind of a common story. So will you help us fix the business and kind of put it together? And so we started doing that, and they invited some of their friends and told them what we were doing. And all of a sudden I had a whole bunch of partners and we created this infrastructure. And now I've got 35 shared services employees that are supporting all of the businesses and getting all the systems and all that stuff kind of in line. And it's, doing a couple $100 million in revenue and growing, at a pretty rapid pace.
That's phenomenal.
It happened where I do everything with a plan, right? I told you so there was this initial kind of plan of okay, this is what is needed, but I didn't have the plan of I'm going to go build a couple $100 million, scaled business with, these amazing partners and infrastructure. I just didn't have that idea in my head, and it just happened organically. And I just kept saying yes to people that I thought were good people and partner, to me, that's always been the right thing. You find the right person or people, and then you build systems around those people and you have success. And so if you're saying yes to, you guys called, I make my decisions the same way. I met you guys, thought you guys were good people, clearly understood, I was aligned with your vision. It was just, okay, I can work with that. I like these people. I see what they're doing and I can help them. And I just said yes. And it's the same thing that has happened with building this platform of amazingly successful, awesome people. And it just happened organically because I said yes. And so that's what I love about it.
The fact that those people were seeking you out to try to work with you is a testament to the reputation you have in the industry. And if you keep giving, saying yes, I'll help you, many times expecting nothing in return, it sets you up very well to then create a company around, around interacting with those people and then expecting something in return, which is always a good end game.
And like now that as you start seeing where it can go and what can happen, right? And as I look around, I'm like, we're the only operator-backed platform in the space. Like we're the only ones that are just operate. It's not some private equity backed. The operators are going to be in control. There's no reason for the operators to ever not be in control as they continue to scale and build something tremendously valuable. And yeah, I didn't realize that was a missing spot in the space.
Just so anyone listening out there who doesn't know you or doesn't understand, what's the right size business? What are the companies that, other than, you meet them and they're good people and you want to work with them, where do they need to be in their journey where it does make sense to engage with you and your team to be part of that?
Well, I think, almost all the things that we've covered before this in terms of like who you are as an entrepreneur, the openness, the alignment. To me, it's more about alignment than it is specific size. And people will say, and I understand why. I understand that, I was on with a group 2 days ago, and they're like, okay, well, we've set the parameters. If we're going to enter a new market, we have to be minimum 8 to 9 million with over $1 million of EBITDA considered like acquiring and going into that market. If it's an adjacent or tuck in, then we can do, these are the requirements. And I understand why, because it takes the same amount of support sometimes to support a $2 million operator as it does a $22 million operator, right? So in terms of ROI, it's definitely better to go bigger, and that's why it's so much more desirable. But I find that you get the bigger lift sometimes if you don't put those parameters. If you just go, hey, I met this person has the desire, he's willing to learn, he's willing to implement, he's a leader, he or she is a leader. To me, that's really the most important thing. Now, have I been wrong? Have I been snowed? Sure. That's just like with hiring employees or whatever, right? But for the most part, I think when you meet somebody that genuinely just like, hey, I need help getting to this point. I want to get to this point. I like to be this valuable. I'd like to maybe monetize at this point. And you know that you can help that person and they're going to listen. That's really all that matters to me.
Yeah. Teachability is such a huge part of that, right? I mean, generally you have to have that to be looking for help. But if you're going to go to somebody who's been there, done that, the worst thing you can do is go to them and be like, I know better. Right. So, and especially in this industry, you can go from 5 million to 25 million in 3 years. Right. I mean, that happens. Right. So having somebody that's going to be, worth putting 3 to 5 years into at 5 million is, better than a $25 million shop who has big britches and things. Say, I may learn a thing or two from Landon and his team, but in general, I'm 98% of the way there. Right. Because realistically, very few operations are. And you can always learn a lot from people that have decades of more experience.
Well, guys, we've covered a ton of territory. I appreciate everybody's time. I've got a few wrap-up notes and some stuff I'm going to cover. Before I do that, I'll leave the floor open for you guys to cover anything or recap anything, or maybe cover something that we didn't fully cover earlier in the conversations.
Well, Andy, would you say we've come to the end of the road? I froze and opened with the boys' reference.
Yeah, that's a good bookends there. So I mean, just a couple of things for everybody out there. We're not running commercials and stuff, so we're not going to list off a whole host of people that we've worked with or we recommend as organizations. But if you are curious, if you're looking for support from a very success group or people in the industry you might want to get a hold of. We're all on LinkedIn. You can all catch us pretty easily. Reach out. We're happy to share the good groups that we've worked with that we do recommend. As Landon said, there's a lot of people out there that are spewing information. That's all it is. It's not founded in anything else. But just to recap, some of the great things I took away from today. Number one I got is come in with big goals. I think that's a great one. Starting, don't come in with a small vision. Come in with something that, if you're going to do it, you need the motivation to do it, and that motivation needs to be big enough. So I love that one. Fill your knowledge gaps, right? Understand that those do exist and are going to exist. So understand that and be ready. I loved your comment on saying be a leader. And what that means, you kind of had two different parts to it. And I think there's a few, but number one, be somebody who can motivate and inspire others, but then also be somebody who's going to follow through on their word, be true to your word. And that's huge for people to want to follow. Openness to other ideas, and then openness to make the bold moves where needed. I think that's awesome, right? One that, we didn't touch on a ton, but I think is super, super important. And I think is just care for your health. That's mental and physical. This is a very, very big, audacious, stressful thing to do, be an entrepreneur. And if you can't take care of those things with good friends, family, and support around you, as well as good habits and all that stuff, then the journey ends for you well before what your capability is to reach. And then the last piece, which I think is definitely the period on this, is just you've got to have good data to be able to measure your success and watch along the way. If you don't have data on anything you're doing, then you are literally running blind. And so I thought that was huge.
Your second to last point there, I think it was Elon Musk maybe said, but if you're going to endeavor to be an entrepreneur, what I would do to prepare yourself is you have to realize you have to become comfortable with a level of stress and disappointment and, just kind of agony that would put most people down quickly, right? You have to be comfortable, like just handling that every day as part of like, oh, this means going in the book, right? And if you can't handle that, you need to figure out from a mental health, physical health, whether it's exercise, like you got to figure out a way to relieve that stress or just not do it in the first place, because it will just absolutely tear you down if you can't figure it out.
And if you can't eat, breathe, and sleep it for a number of years and sacrifice what it's gonna take to do that, maybe that's not 10. It might be 10, but it has to at least be 2 or 3, right? If you're gonna start a business, there can't be, I'm still gonna take 4, 5, 6 weeks of vacation every year. Like that you're not going to be successful and you're not going to keep growing. At a minimum, the team's following you, and you can't ask everyone to bust their ass if you're kicking back all the time, right? So I do think every time I advise a startup or a founder, it's like, hey, you have this idea, great. Are you willing to give 5 years of your life to it? Because if you're not willing to do that, then you really should find something that you are willing to sacrifice that for, because realistically, that's stick-to-itiveness is probably the main thing that I've seen, that just deciding I'm going to make this successful and this is going to happen. And whether it takes 3 years or 7 years, I'm not sure, but it's going to friggin' happen, right? And I think at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest factor that I've seen in successful entrepreneurs.
Well, that's a great wrap up, Josh, because I think that, to me, when I hear that, I say the business has to be able to be at a place where it's self-sufficient and survive without the founder being around every day. That takes a while, right? Because the founder is the passion for a long time. So you got to be out of survival mode, probably well into adaptation mode, and maybe even slightly into thriving mode before you actually have the ability to step back and let the organization run itself. And that's just a matter of time.
Yep. And even if you do, you better step back and have your finger on the pulse to know whether or not you just step back in and get it right back on track. Because obviously, especially in private equity, we've seen a lot of businesses where once they lose that id factor from the founder, it's hard to replace that with just a pencil pusher. Obviously, there's some good private equity groups out there, but a lot of horror stories too of people that come in have never worked in the industry at all, right? So, have that it factor and add that to your team and make sure that you've gotten through that scaling into thriving before you take a step back.
Awesome. Thanks, Landon. I can't thank you enough, man. It was great. It was great catching up. Can't wait to do it again in person. More drinks involved. And as always, man, just love you, brother. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to get connected, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. As always, keep growing out there.